A man climbs down a set of rear stairs into a black sky 10,000 feet above the Pacific Northwest, with $200,000 strapped to his body, and he is never seen again. For over 50 years, nobody could tell you his real name. Not the FBI. Not the hundreds of agents who chased him. Not the thousands of tips that led nowhere. But somewhere in a dusty outbuilding in North Carolina, hidden behind old furniture and forgotten boxes, two grown children finally pulled back a canvas bundle they had kept secret their entire lives. And what they revealed may be the closest anyone has ever come to answering the question that has haunted American law enforcement for over half a century. Who was D.B. Cooper? Stay with us, because this story does not end where you think it does. It started on the day before Thanksgiving in 1971. Portland International Airport was crowded with holiday travelers, and Northwest Orient Flight 305 was scheduled for a short, unremarkable 30-minute hop up to Seattle. Nobody paid much attention to the man who bought his ticket under the name Dan Cooper, a middle-aged man in a dark suit, a black raincoat, and sunglasses, carrying nothing but a briefcase. He took his seat near the back of the plane, ordered a bourbon and soda once they were airborne, and waited. Not long after takeoff, he passed a folded note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a phone number and slipped it into her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned toward her and said quietly that she should probably take a look. When she opened the note, it explained that he had a bomb in his briefcase, and he wanted her to sit beside him. He cracked the case open just enough for her to see wires and cylinders that looked like dynamite. What he wanted was simple and specific: $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills for parachutes and a fuel truck standing by once they landed in Seattle. The pilots radioed the demand to the ground, and within minutes, the FBI had been notified. While the plane circled Puget Sound for hours to buy time, agents scrambled to gather the ransom and the parachutes. Passengers were told there was a minor mechanical delay and had no idea they were sitting a few rows away from a man threatening to blow the aircraft out of the sky. Once the plane finally landed in Seattle, the passengers and most of the crew were released unharmed. Cooper got his money and his parachutes and ordered the plane back into the air, this time heading toward Reno, flying low and slow with the rear stairs down. Somewhere over the dense, rain-soaked forests of southwest Washington, in the freezing dark, with wind howling around the fuselage, Cooper walked to those open stairs and jumped. He left behind his clip-on tie, a few cigarette butts, and almost nothing else. When the plane landed in Reno, the cockpit crew found the rear cabin empty. The man who had just carried out one of the boldest crimes in American history had simply vanished into the night. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in FBI history. Hundreds of agents, soldiers, and volunteers combed the forests of southwest Washington on foot. Helicopters swept the tree line. Dogs searched for any scent. And they found absolutely nothing: no parachute, no money, no body, not even a footprint in the mud. It was as if the man had dissolved into the rain. A media mix-up along the way turned his alias from Dan Cooper into D.B. Cooper, and the name stuck for good, cementing him as a kind of folk antihero, the man who beat the system and vanished without a trace. For 9 years, the case sat cold. Then, in February of 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, when he uncovered 3 decayed bundles of $20 bills, still bound with rubber bands. The serial numbers matched the ransom money exactly. It was the only physical evidence ever tied directly to the hijacking, and it reignited the case for a while. Divers searched the river. Forensic teams pored over the bills. But it raised more questions than it answered. Had Cooper drowned, with the money washing downstream over the years? Or had it been planted or lost some other way entirely? Nobody could say for certain, and the trail went cold again. By 2016, after examining over 1,000 suspects, collecting DNA samples, and chasing down decades of dead ends, the FBI officially closed its active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case, while stating they would still review any new and credible physical evidence. That is where most people assumed the story would end, as America's only unsolved skyjacking, filed away forever as a mystery too clean to ever be cracked. But one man refused to let it go. Dan Grider is a retired airline captain with tens of thousands of flight hours. And in his retirement, he built a YouTube channel focused on aviation safety and unsolved aviation mysteries. Cooper's case had fascinated him for years, and he spent a long stretch of that time digging through old flight logs, terrain maps, declassified FBI files, and jump physics, trying to work out where a hijacker in cheap loafers could realistically have landed and survived in 1971. Along the way, one name kept resurfacing in Cooper circles: Richard Floyd McCoy II. On paper, McCoy did not look like a criminal. He was a devout Mormon from Utah, a decorated Vietnam veteran who had flown helicopters in combat, a licensed skydiving instructor, and, at the time, a family man working toward a law degree. Friends and neighbors described him as clean-cut, disciplined, and deeply religious. And yet, just 5 months after Cooper disappeared into legend, McCoy carried out an almost identical hijacking of his own. On April 7, 1972, McCoy boarded United Airlines Flight 855 out of Denver. He handed a flight attendant a note claiming he had a bomb, demanded $500,000 in cash and 4 parachutes, and ordered the crew to fly him toward San Francisco. Once he had the money, he jumped from the rear stairs of the aircraft somewhere over Utah, using skills he had actually trained for, since he was an experienced skydiver. Unlike Cooper, though McCoy made mistakes, he left a handwritten note behind in the cabin, and investigators lifted his fingerprints off a drinking glass. Within days, the FBI matched those prints and arrested him at his home in Provo, in front of his family. The similarities between the two hijackings were impossible to ignore. The same type of Boeing 727, the same demand for parachutes and a fuel truck, the same rear stairs jump, the same calm, controlled demeanor from the hijacker. For a while, investigators genuinely wondered if McCoy and Cooper were the same person. But the FBI ultimately ruled that out. Witnesses who saw Cooper on the plane described a man in his mid-40s with dark hair and a darker complexion, while McCoy was 29, fair-skinned, and lighter-haired. The handwriting and phrasing in the 2 ransom notes did not match cleanly either. The Bureau concluded McCoy was almost certainly a copycat, inspired by Cooper's crime rather than connected to it, and he was sentenced to 45 years in prison for his own hijacking. McCoy never served that full sentence. In 1974, he and several other inmates broke out of a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania using a garbage truck. 3 months later, U.S. Marshals and FBI agents tracked him down to a house in Virginia. When agents moved in, a gunfight broke out, and McCoy was killed. He was 30 years old. And for decades after that, the theory that he might also have been D.B. Cooper stayed exactly where the FBI had left it, an interesting footnote, but officially closed. That is, until Dan Grider tracked down McCoy's 2 surviving children, Richard McCoy III and his sister Shantae. For years, they wanted nothing to do with reporters or amateur investigators. According to Grider, he tried reaching out to them for roughly 2 decades before they finally responded. What changed, according to the family, was time, specifically the death of their mother, Karen McCoy, in 2020. The siblings have said publicly that they waited because they believed their mother may have known more about their father's activities than she ever let on, and they did not want to risk implicating her while she was alive. Once their mother had passed, Rick and Shantae told Grider something they say they had quietly believed for most of their lives, that their father was D.B. Cooper. And they said they had more than just a family rumor to back it up. Tucked away on the family's property in Cove City, North Carolina, was a parachute rig that had sat largely forgotten for decades, a military-style harness and canopy with unusual modifications. Alongside it was one of their father's old skydiving logbooks, which appeared to place him jumping in rugged terrain around Oregon and Utah during the exact stretch of years both hijackings occurred. Grider examined the rig himself and became convinced it was significant, describing the specific harness clips and reinforced rigging as matching details the FBI had documented from the parachutes it supplied to Cooper back in 1971 modifications, according to Grider, that had been made by an FBI skydiving consultant and were never publicly disclosed. He has since called the parachute a 1 in a billion find. It is worth being clear here, though, that matching modifications, according to a private investigator, is not the same thing as forensic confirmation, and the FBI has never publicly verified Grider's claims about the parachute's origin. Still, the discovery was enough to get the Bureau's attention. After Grider began publishing videos about the parachute in late 2023, FBI agents reportedly reached out to examine it. Rick McCoy and Grider met with agents in Richmond, Virginia that September, and the parachute, harness, and logbook were taken into evidence. Rick also says he voluntarily provided a DNA sample, in the hope it could be compared against partial genetic material the FBI had recovered decades earlier from the clip-on tie Cooper left behind on the plane. The idea being floated by some investigators, including Grider, was that Richard McCoy's remains could eventually be exhumed to settle the DNA question once and for all, though there is no confirmed public record that exhumation has actually taken place. So where does that leave the case today? Here is where the story gets murkier than most viral headlines suggest. The FBI has never issued a public statement confirming that Richard McCoy Jr. was D.B. Cooper. The Bureau has consistently maintained that the case was officially closed in 2016, and it has not reopened it in any formal sense, even while quietly accepting the parachute for examination. And in a strange twist reported in early 2026, the FBI is said to have returned the parachute to the McCoy family without any public explanation of what their testing found. An outcome that, if anything, suggests the evidence was inconclusive rather than a smoking gun. Retired agents who have commented publicly on this have noted that returning evidence usually means it was not compelling enough to build a case around. So is Richard McCoy Jr. really D.B. Cooper? The honest answer is that nobody can say for certain. Not yet, and maybe not ever. What we do have is a strikingly similar hijacking carried out 5 months after Cooper's, by a highly trained skydiver who fit the general profile of someone capable of surviving that jump. 2 adult children who say they have believed for most of their lives that their father was the man behind the legend. And a decades-old parachute that one dedicated investigator believes matches details from the original case, but which has not been independently confirmed by forensic science or officially validated by the FBI. That is a compelling theory. It is not, at this point, a proven fact. And it is important to say so plainly rather than pretend the mystery has been definitively solved. What makes this story so hard to let go of is not just the parachute or the DNA or the timeline. It is the human weight sitting underneath all of it. If the McCoy family's account is true, 2 children carried the possibility that their father committed America's most famous unsolved crime for their entire adult lives, staying silent to protect a mother they believed might have been involved, only speaking once she was gone. Whether or not the physical evidence ever holds up in a lab, that alone says something about how far people will go to protect the people they love, and how heavy a secret can become when it is carried for 50 years instead of 5. D.B. Cooper became a legend precisely because he got away clean. No body, no face, no name. Just a story that grew bigger with every year it stayed unsolved. Richard McCoy Jr. was a real, flawed, complicated man who died in a shootout with federal agents in 1974, long before anyone thought to connect the 2 cases seriously. Maybe those 2 facts belong to the same person. Maybe they never will. What is